Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free review of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This is an adult dystopian novel and it's now been made into a Netflix series as well, and it's basically heralded as a bit of a feminist classic. So the story is set in kind of a near future where women's freedom is pretty much completely stripped away from them. A lot of women in this society are infertile, which is obviously a problem. So women can either be wives, they can be handmaids, which means they'll be someone whose sole purpose in life is to bear children for husbands and wives who can't have them. They might be a Martha, which is basically a maid, or if they're particularly rebellious, if they've done something wrong, if they're a handmaid and they're found not to be able to bear children, they're shipped off to the colonies, which is kind of your worst case scenario because people who go there are kind of doing hard labour and in really, really bad conditions where you're likely to die. Men, on the other hand, pretty much just work, and as they work their way up the ranks, they might be given a wife, and if they're really lucky, they might be given a handmaid as well. Our protagonist's name is Offred. She is someone who can remember what her life used to be like when she was kind of a normal person like you and I live in her life. This book was a 5-star read for me. I thought it was fantastic. First of all, I want to talk about Offred because I think as a character, as a protagonist, she's not someone that I found likable. I didn't like her. I didn't feel like I could necessarily identify with her as such, but I don't think she's meant to be likable because I think she's meant to be just an ordinary woman like you and I. She's not perfect, but she's thrown into this situation and this is just how she is reacting to it. She's not Katniss Everdeen, she's not some rebellious feminist hero, she's just an ordinary woman who's been thrown into this terrible situation. I kind of like that because there are a lot of times, especially in dystopians, especially in YA dystopia I guess, you get the really heroic woman figure who kind of ends up saving everyone and changing the world, and Offred isn't like that. She's just more apathetic, I guess. She's more of like an ordinary person who doesn't really know what to do. She's just, this is the life she's been given, basically. You know, I feel like most of us reading dystopians, we like to think of ourselves in that situation like we might be a bit of a revolutionary, we're someone who wouldn't put up with these things, but I think she, being an ordinary woman thrown into this nightmare situation, she's kind of dealing with it as best she can. She's not necessarily a strong female character, I don't think. Not everyone has to be like that. I think this is it's more an exploration of the world rather than like a gung-ho, this is how we can overthrow the patriarchy kind of novel. I still see this as a feminist novel. I think it can be feminist without having women actually overthrowing the patriarchy. I think it's feminist in the way that it shows how harmful the patriarchy is, because we're still seeing this patriarchal theocracy from the point of view of a woman who is oppressed, and we're seeing all of the flaws of that system, and we're seeing how harmful it is and how painful it makes life for her. And we see the internalized misogyny within Offred as well. There are certain things that she kind of just accepts. We do meet women who I would say are feminists, some of Offred's friends, some women that she comes across. I think some of those women are more like feminist revolutionaries in this story, but Offred isn't one of them. The thing I really liked about this was the writing style. It's told in like a non-linear kind of narrative, so it flits back and forth between different moments from Offred's past, from her childhood, her adulthood, shortly before all of these things change, like all these different moments that give you a real picture of how she has ended up in the situation where she is now. And it obviously explores as well the situation that she is in now, and I find that kind of storytelling really interesting because the situation unfolds kind of slowly and you kind of like piece it together bit by bit. There were definitely questions that were coming up for me, like you start off seeing where she is now and you start thinking to yourself like, how could this possibly happen? Like, what situation would women let this happen? And then you flip back and forth with her past and you kind of realize, you know, the day or the weeks leading up to it, this was what was happening. The day of, this is what happened. All the stuff that happened shortly after that, like how it just kind of unraveled, and I really like that. I also really liked how important language is to this story. In this society, they don't use like figures of speech or idioms or anything like that anymore. They're very stilted and formal and simplistic with their language, and the storytelling reflects that. Because it's first person from Offred's point of view, it's told in a way that she would speak, I suppose. And I think that kind of storytelling is effective in a dystopian novel like this because it shows how creativity and imaginative kind of thought is really quashed. There's no music in the society, there's no books, like magazines, everything like that are banned. So I think that's really reflected in the language that they use. If you restrict the way that someone is able to speak, you are also restricting the way that they can think. I'm not entirely sure, I'd probably have to like reread to go back over it and see what I think, but I feel like there is more imagery and figures of speech the more the novel goes on. Like at the beginning there are hardly any, and where there are, Offred acknowledges that they don't speak like that anymore. As the novel goes on, she uses more figures of speech without using some kind of disclaimer. Like it kind of, I feel like, shows her character development and her starting to not accept this position that she's in, and I feel like that use of language is really a really clever way to show her character development. Overall, I found this book fascinating and I would highly recommend it if you're thinking about picking it up. If you're someone who likes dystopians, I think this is a really interesting dystopian world to explore. I am studying this book in uni at the moment, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how my thoughts and opinions about this book change as I study it as well, because it always like gives me a new perspective when I hear a more like academic way of thinking about a text, so I'm really looking forward to doing that. But if you've read this book, let me know what you thought of it. If you've seen the Netflix series, let me know what you think of that as well, because I really want to watch it. And if you're thinking about picking this book up, let me know that too. And I'll see you guys with another video in a couple days. Bye.